Good morning. We are moving on to 10.5, selecting an appropriate display. So this is the last lesson of the entire year. Goodness. Go you guys for keeping up with all of this and keeping up with the videos. This lesson is pretty kind of simple and straightforward as long as you're comfortable with the vocab and the types of data display. So a few of these we're really used to, a few we're not quite as used to. I am going to move quickly through all of this, but pause the video, make sure you understand the definition for each of them. So bar graph is something that we're very familiar with, right? If you like cats, if there are 5 students who like cats, cats is one of the categories, go up 5. If you like dogs, dogs is one of the categories, there are 6 people who like dogs, right? And 8 people who like fish. So bar graph's pretty simple, straightforward categories. Box plot is the box and whisker plot. So we've just spent quite a little bit of time working through those recently, so we should be okay with that. That's where we need to work with our media and our quartile 1, quartile 3. So we're okay there. Circle graph is comparing parts to a whole. That's where we are dealing with percents. So anything that has to do with parts to a whole, which is a percent, we would use a circle graph. Double bar graph compares 2 sets of categorical data, and I believe I have a visual in just a second. I'll show you. Histogram shows frequency of data divided into equal interval, and when you think intervals, think ranges. So if you have how much money you make for mowing lawns, right? What the possible pay would be. Maybe it's $25 to $29. So if you're in that 20s range, or $30 to $34, or that $35 to $39, or $40 to $45. So that has to do with ranges. And again, I'll show you an example of that. Line graph is showing change over time. Line plot. So line plot is where you've got the number line and then you've got the dots going up, or the little X's on the number line to show you the frequency or the number of numbers. Alrighty, so over here we've got the first one is that bar graph, something typical, that we're familiar with. The second one is the histogram. So look at those ranges. So it says age groups and years. Whenever you're dealing with groups or ranges or intervals, that's a histogram. Something to keep in mind is look at the bar graph, the space between the bars, compared to the histogram. There's no space between the bars. And then we've got our line graph. And then we've got our line plot. So I did not have an example of a double bar graph, but it would be, if we were talking about Miss Erdman's class versus my class, talking about rabbits, we would have this bar, and then maybe this bar would go higher because Miss Erdman's class liked rabbits more. Something like that. So still kind of same categories, but different population would be an example of a double bar graph. Alrighty, so questions to ask yourself when deciding on what type of display to use. So you'll be given a situation and you've got to decide which display is best. And then sometimes they'll ask you to make that display, sometimes they won't. So first question is, what type of information is given? So are they giving you categories? Are they giving you a very large set of data where a box and whisker plot would be necessary, parts to a whole, so things like that. What do you want your display to show? And then how will the data be analyzed? So are you going to, I actually don't believe they asked that question. But that's like your median, your interquartile range, your mode, things like that. When you have a line plot where it says frequency, often they'll ask for mode, where like a histogram, maybe they would, but a box and whisker plot, you wouldn't be able to answer mode, right? Mode is what happens most often. Alrighty, so example 1. Select an appropriate display to show the number of boys of different age ranges to participate in athletics. So the first thing is to highlight the keywords that would give a signal to use a specific display. So in this word problem, there is a word that kind of pops out to me, and that's telling me what display that I need to use. Number of boys of different age ranges that participate in athletics. The word that pops out to me is ranges, age ranges. So automatically when I see that, I'm going to think histogram. So I would say histogram. B/C is because it deals with age, or it deals with ranges. In this case, I guess specifically age ranges. So straightforward, decide which display is best. So we only have 2 examples. So that's the first type of question you'll be asked. This is an example of the histogram that you could make. Sometimes, let's see, on your homework, they will ask you to draw a display, but in this case, they didn't. Example 2, they will ask you to draw the display, or they construct the display. Alrighty, so example 2, select an appropriate display to compare the percent of ethanol production by state. Justify your reasoning. Then construct the display. What can you conclude from your display? Now, the question that's added on here, other than constructing, is what can you conclude? There are a couple things that you can say that you can conclude about a visual, about a display, that maybe I would look and I would conclude something different, right? Neither would be wrong, but maybe you talk about what is the least and I talk about what is the most. So when you look at the answer key, if I have something different, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're wrong. Alrighty, so ethanol production by state per year. And then it says select an appropriate display to compare the percent. Okay, so the first question is highlight what words are telling us what type of display would be best. In this case, the word percent is super important. When we think percent, we need to think circle graph, right? So this would be a circle graph because the word percent. However, it says construct the display, or justify reasoning because it says percent. To construct the display, we are only given the number or the gallons of ethanol production by state. That's not the percent. It wants us to find the percent, but it only gives us the number of gallons. So percent is part to whole. So to find the percent for Iowa, we would put Iowa over the total, and that'll give us a decimal, which we'll convert to a percent. Same with Nebraska, that 1665 over the total. So to find the total, we need to add all of those numbers together to get the whole. So I've added each of the gallons per state together. I've got 13,608 gallons total. Then to find the percent for each state, I'm going to put that number for Iowa over the total. I'm going to get a decimal. So 0.26, right? So if we actually do that, it's 3,500. 4 divided by 13, 608. It is 0.2597, but since it's a percent, we need to round to the nearest whole. So instead of 0.259, it becomes about 26%. So you're going to find the percent for each of those. So Nebraska is about 12%. You would find Illinois by doing 1,135 divided by 13,608. And you would get a decimal and convert it to a percent. Then constructing it is pretty difficult. Well, for me, because I'm a terrible drawer. But you'll see in your homework, my drawing, 26%. So if you think a quarter of this is about that. So 26 would be just a little bit more than that. So this would be Iowa. And then you can go from there. So 12% is probably itty bitty. And then do the other percents from there. It does absolutely not have to be perfect. You'll see mine. So you're doing your best to draw a graph that represents those percents. And then I've brought you a nice, well done graph here. So again, Iowa, that 26%. These are the percents that you would get for each of those states. Alrighty, so I went through those notes pretty quickly. Please let me know if you have any questions, comments, concerns. You should be able to get through your homework fairly quickly as well. And that is it. That is the last lesson of the year. Holy smokes. And I will see you tomorrow for our Zoom meeting at noon. Have an awesome day.